Hello, everyone, once again. This is Rob, and welcome back to Media Awareness and Unplanned Part 2 of Tell Them That You Love Me. It's a Netflix original documentary, and actually hits quite close to home for me as a disabled individual, but not for the reasons you might be suspecting. Now, if you haven't seen part one of my review, I will have that link below, and that way you can easily access that. However, before I get to any more further words on this, I do want to remind you all that my fundraiser continues. For those of you unaware, I am a disabled individual, and I use a motorized wheelchair slash scooter all day, every day for my independence, and I need your help desperately. My insurance will not cover anything with regard to my scooter, as they view it as a quote luxury item, end quote. Despite the fact that I'm unable to walk whatsoever, unable to use any other type of power chair or a standard wheelchair for that matter, only having limited use of one hand. In addition to that, I do not have a backup scooter, so if this malfunctions, which it recently did, I am a fish out of water. And fortunately, I was able to get this repaired. Um, it did uh, cost quite a bit, but it was manageable and able to get fixed. But that's what I want to avoid. I want to have parts on hand to potentially uh, alleviate any uh, un- unnecessary purchases of those items so that way I could just call up the technicians, have them come out, and only have to pay them for their time and effort. It's really that simple. Um, I'm far from reaching the target goal, and the target goal is uh, high because I am hoping to raise enough to get a backup scooter. So that way I can actually put this one safely stored away and have it so that way when the other one, the newer one, malfunctions, I could just swap it out and it could be a rather easy um, exchange. Uh, my insurance and those who manage that uh, area of the finances of government, etc., are not very accommodating when it comes to individual needs. And I'll get to that more in my review because that's something else that I think wasn't really addressed for Damon in his life, um, his personal needs. Uh, because being nonverbal and highly spastic in terms of his muscle tone, it's hard to know what his true real needs are. So, um, whatever you can do is appreciated. There is a spot fund link in the description in two places, right below the title, as well as in the separate section below that. Any and all help is welcome. I do want to extend a gracious thanks to those who have contributed thus far, in addition to those who plan on contributing, as your contributions have and will make a world of difference in my life, and I truly appreciate you all, and I love you all. On with this review. So, as stated, I did do a review when I first watched this on Netflix a few months ago, and it's been haunting me ever since I did that review because in the back of my mind I wanted to say so much more, and I keep rewatching it on Netflix. I can't stop watching this. It's like the only analogy I can make it as it's like watching an accident happen in slow motion, and you just cannot turn away. And that's kind of how I am with this documentary. And it's really sort of consumed a vast majority of my free time when I'm not writing and not doing other creative outlets that I am engaging in, creating music, etc. It's one of those things that really is troubling. Now, for those of you, like I said, if you haven't watched part one, it's linked below. Please do so, and then watch this part because it'll be basically. I'm not gonna recap any of that. I haven't even looked back on it, but I do recall a lot of what I said, and I stand by everything I said in that first review. But my feelings towards uh, the situation and or situations for that matter, and how it relates to my own life and my own history as a disabled individual. Now, 53 years old, I had a birthday a few weeks ago. Um, it's really something that I felt I needed to add to. Um, I I really recently, like I said, like I alluded to actually, um, I was a fish out of the water without my scooter being functional, and I was dependent on people to get me around my house during that time frame. And when I made the calls to different agencies that I work with, they were trying to set up evaluations with physical therapists and uh, other um, individuals to assess my needs. Now, I've been using motorized scooters since I was 12 years old. I've been disabled since the age of 4. And I've been using the same brand of motorized scooters, Amigo scooters, Amigo Mobility, since I was 12 years old. And at 53, I think I know what works for me. Especially when I've been using the same type of scooter, oh gosh, for the better part of 15, 20 years. Um, so I'm fairly confident that I know what works for me, and I know how to make it work for me in my everyday life as a tool as well. But in addition to that, what insurance companies are doing, and I think this is important to point out before I go into any more about this documentary, they are trying to basically put a person that is accustomed to one thing and give them something inferior or something that they're unfamiliar with, a different type of motorized chair, um, and if any modifications whatsoever are done to any and all adaptive devices, uh, they are no longer covered under the manufacturer warranty, according to what I was told recently. And that was rather disconcerting for me. Uh, I have a fairly intense degree of muscle tone myself, and when I sneeze, it's a earth-shattering experience. And these newer scooters that are being pushed basically on people because of um, Medicaid and Medicare coverages are basically uh, scooters that are not necessarily tailored to the individual, but they are what the insurance will pay for. And as stated, if any modifications are done, it negates anything that would be covered for repairs. Because I asked about a key being replaced for a button to make things easier on me, as I have a habit of breaking off keys um, in my history with my scooter. And they had told me that they cannot do that. It would negate the warranty, which is not helpful. So, with all of that stated, I think it's important to stress the importance of the insurance aspect of disability, the financial aspects of disability, and how disabled individuals like myself, like Damon, do receive Social Security disability and all the coverages that go with it, whether you're eligible for Medicaid, Medicare, um, and at any level. It all depends on the disability and the wording or phrasing of the disability in the paperwork itself. Uh, so there's a lot to take into consideration when it comes to disabilities. And I think another thing that a lot of people do is they miscategorize. Uh, they just want to stick us all into one, stick a square peg into a round hole, for lack of better words. Um, and I almost wanted to say to this person on the phone, would you like it if you woke up one morning, were suddenly without legs, and somebody says to you, well, I can give you a new set of legs, but they aren't going to be your legs, and they are going to be uh, potentially not compatible with you. But you'll have to deal with that because that's all the insurance will cover. And that's kind of how I feel. And uh, in terms of how this relates to uh, the documentary, uh, it I feel really um, it really is something that could be explored more. There are so many assistive devices, assistive technology, adaptive devices that are out there for people that are nonverbal. And they can be tailored to the individual. So that way they can communicate effectively, not necessarily using what the mom used in the documentary and in his training with Anna, but something that would be more conducive for him. Uh, it seemed as if that device was being used because it was a convenient device to use. But there would be ways to assess truly what his capabilities are and were if these other devices were implemented. In addition to that, uh, there's there's a lot that bothered me with the sort of the concluding aspects when they were uh, uh, trying to evaluate independently demands demands capabilities and his intelligence. Because, as I believe I stated in part one, if you are a disabled individual and you are unaware of your rights and unaware of the law and unaware of how things actually work, family can be a powerful persuader. And there are multiple times when I was told by my mother, specifically when she was alive, if you say this to this person, you might not ever see your father and I again. And so I wasn't allowed to be honest or truthful regarding certain aspects of my life if they were pertinent to my everyday life in my home. And when I was still living with them. And, you know, it. I thought about that and I thought, well, I was told that as a verbal disabled individual who was able to articulate what my wants, needs, and desires are. But Damon was told this as someone who cannot do that independently, and he may have been told, you know, don't go along with this. Act the way that you acted previously to even knowing Anna. Just don't show any signs that you know anything, or you won't see us again. And I'm suspecting that's a possibility of what happened in terms of the family dynamic. Because family, as I said, can be a powerful persuading factor in the life of a disabled individual. I didn't know, and I said this in one of my previous videos, I did not know that I was receiving Social Security disability or even what it was. Um, and when I started college, I had to get the amount for financial aid. And uh, when I was asking my mother, she just kept saying, "Well, bring the paperwork home. I'll fill it out." I'm like, "Well, they want to know now," which was honestly the truth. And she rambled off a number. I'm like, "Well, where's all this money going?" And I was told that, where do you think this comes from? Where do you think that comes from? And it was, a lot of it was stuff that had no applicability to me as an individual. This got worse as my life went on forward. Um, and toward the end of my mother's life, before her untimely passing in 2018 due to a car accident, uh, I had confronted her about a quote unquote savings that was put aside for me and a separate savings that was put aside as well. And I was told that, well, it'll all be put back in there. How do you think that your kids went on vacation with my dad and my mom? My dad was unaware of where the finances came from. He thought it was from their business that they owned, when in fact their business was not doing well, and any and all finances were coming from me, and they were paying for vacations. They were paying for uh, different things that I was not consulted about, that were not even for me. And it was my Social Security, which I trusted her with, because I was told that repeatedly that I would not be able to handle my own finances on my own. I would not be responsible enough to handle my own finances on my own. And that was in 2018. Here we are in 2024, and my mortgage is almost completely paid off. I am up to date on all of my bills, and I'm pretty damn proud of what I'm doing and how I handle things month to month. And it's not rocket science. But when you're told something by an authority figure, no matter how much you respect them or you don't, they are still that authority figure in your life. And you are still kind of honor bound to believe what they say, even if it's not right and even if there's nothing to back it up. And, you know, there's the one scene that really stands out to me again and again is this independent um, uh, psychiatrist or psychologist that they had gotten to testify um, and spend time with them on and have him evaluate him on communication skills as he was a quote unquote expert, which I do not doubt. But I don't think enough time was spent with Damon, and I also think that Damon was told to basically not comply and not show any indications of intellect, or else he would not see his family again. Because there are a lot of red flags prior to that. Uh, Earlier on, when uh, Damon's first communicating along with Anna, and um, he says what he wants to be called. Um, that right there is something that she had no knowledge of, and it wasn't until she consulted with his brother that it made sense that, oh, okay, this is what he means. And that's something that she had no way of knowing. So I really, my heart goes out to her because I know what it's like to love and to lose. Um, and I was married and divorced twice. I have two amazing children from my second marriage. Uh, but I was always told by uh, my mother, you shouldn't be so picky. Um, because, you know, you're not going to get everything you want. And I recognize that I'm not going to get everything I want in a significant other, but I also recognize that I don't have to settle in my life either. And that's kind of where, the catch 22 comes in, if you will. There's a lot to be said for uh, people with disabilities settling in their lives for a life in general with someone, even if that someone isn't their someone, because it's easier than going on searching. But if you instinctively, in your heart, in your mind, know that you want more, know that you are deserving of more, why can't you seek that out? You know, I unfortunately lost a fiance um, in 2014. She passed away, and that was heartbreaking to me. But I didn't give up on looking after that, and that was a relationship that my mother was really objective to, and she was saying that she felt that that girl was out for. She thought that I had money basically, and that was always my mother's big thing. Well, these people are just thinking that you have money, and not considering that they may actually be interested in me as a person, which is insulting. Uh, in addition to that, going back to childhood, just being raised and being harped on for the things that I couldn't do, and I should try to do them better. I should try and do them however I can, uh, which is something that is not necessarily a bad thing. And I do have to say, as a disabled individual, that I have a certain mindset that if I come across a barrier, there is a always a way around that barrier. Whether it's around it, over it, under it, there is no barrier that is too great. But when the cards are stacked against you, when you have all of this family pressure compounding onto you, uh, especially for someone who's nonverbal and really incapable of communicating their wants and needs and desires effectively, independently, it's even harder. And I'm trying my best not to uh, throw the family under the bus in regards to this documentary. But knowing how insurance works, knowing how independent living for Damon or assisted living would have been covered. 4 p.m. by the way. That's my talking clock, an assisted device I have to tell me what time it is day or night. But knowing that insurance covers, uh, training and uh, that sort of thing, and the family being against that makes me consider, well, why was the family so afraid to let them on live on his own and try to live on his own if there wasn't something more there? What's going to hurt if they try? And every time I watch this documentary, I question it. Like, why didn't they try it? See what he was capable of. See how far he could go. And the only thing I keep coming up with is that they were afraid. They were afraid that Damon would succeed. They were afraid that he would excel in his abilities and beyond what they could control. And it's really kind of troubling that you know this is one of those things that was brought up, and yes, the brother was, you know, spoke about it and was very condescending and negative about it, and basically saying who's going to pay for it. It's obvious. The insurance. And even if the insurance only covered an initial evaluation period, that initial evaluation period would tell you what Damon was capable of physically and mentally. And I honestly think that the family was afraid. Um, they were afraid of what might happen and that they might lose their cash cow and their insurance of not only uh, having Demon as a gambling piece for themselves, but also losing their credibility in the grand scheme of things in terms of a lawsuit, which was then to follow. You know, I feel like they were stacking the cards um, behind the scenes and just getting all their ducks in a row. While meanwhile Anna is her name, her credentials, everything is tarnished as a professional, which I think is awful. And I I really struggle with these aspects of this documentary because I know how the system works, but the average person watching this documentary, or you guys out there perhaps watching this video, may not know what the insurance will cover. And I know from experience that sometimes the insurance will only cover a evaluation period. Sometimes if you are affiliated with a alternate uh, source of um, how can I put this? An alternate source of financial um, means, such as OVR, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, or Blindness and Visual Services, which is part of OVR, and that's for the legally blind individuals. If you're not affiliated with one of them, it could be slightly more difficult because you would only perhaps have time for an evaluation period. But based on that evaluation period, you could then get these other agencies involved and they could jump in and they could cover the rest of the funding. Uh, Several years back when I was fresh out of graduate school, I and I believe I may have stated this in part one, so please forgive me if I'm reiterating uh, something once again. But I had the ability and the means to go to an independent living center. Basically, what they wanted to do for Demont, and I went, um, and uh, I had outlined goals that I wanted to achieve. The Independent Living Center is all the way across the state in Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania, so roughly 6 hours away. So I was basically detached from my family, but I made friends, acquaintances, mainly with the staff members more so than the actual people that lived there. But there were some nice people that lived there as well, but it was more so I had this rapport and this respect going on with the staff themselves, and um, this was one of those things that was covered because I was involved with blindness and visual services for my visual deficits, and they were willing to cover for 4 months of me to stay there. And looking back, I probably should have stayed those 4 months. I stayed 1 month, learned everything that I had wanted to learn in four, and couldn't see any reason of staying in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is a town that is unfortunately, or a city that is unfortunately stuck in eternally in the 1960s, um, both in its accessibility as well as its mindset. And but they have one of the greatest independent living centers for training in our state. So that's where I went, and it was far enough away to give me that freedom, that independence. And after that, I had that taste, I had that craving, and when I ended up meeting my first wife, I met her on the internet, and I was actually corresponding with two other women from two other states when I met her, and she stood out to me, and I sort of narrowed things down to her, and uh, you can really put on facades as to who you are on the internet, and we got together. We agreed to have a relationship and to make plans for marriage, and through no fault of either of ours, our relationship did not work out. Uh, there were aspects of her past that she had not dealt with that were affecting our relationship, and there were aspects of my present at that point in time. And this uh, newfound freedom of living with her, but living outside of my parents' immediate um, oversight. My mother, in particular, more so than my dad. My dad was very easygoing and is very easygoing. My mother, on the other hand, was and always had this big brother mentality that she had to always know and keep an eye on everything. But uh, I think that looking back, it was a relationship that my first wife and I entered into to break free of the confines of our lives and to have independence of our established lifestyles at that point in time. And that wasn't a reason for a relationship. Um, we had a lot of disputes. We also had a lot of good times, and I've no doubt that throughout our relationship that she did love me to some degree or another in her own way, and I loved her. But that was a relationship that was not necessarily meant to be at that point in time because of all of our collective skeletons, if you will. And following our separation, really, our extended separation while I paid for the divorce and all that nice red tape, I stayed in the house that I own, and I worked in the work where I worked professionally. I dated. I, you know, um, had sort of this carefree lifestyle that I enjoyed for roughly a year, maybe a little more, a little less, until I met my who would become my second wife. But we met and we hit it off, and we uh, ended up with two amazing children and an incredible friendship as a result of our relationship. We had a lot of obstacles in our relationship, one of which was my mother, who always needing to know things and always putting her uh, her 2 cents, if you will, into everything, every decision, whether it was her business or not. She always had to be involved, and I, at the time, really did not question it. She was handling all of our finances. I didn't question it. Uh, Everything seemed to be okay. Um, but nothing ever really was. When I would get calls from different utility companies, and they would say that I owe 3 months or I owe 4 months, and I would call my mom and say, I got this call. What's this about? Oh, it must be a mistake. Just call them and set up a payment arrangement, is what I was told. And because I believed her and believed that she had my best interest at heart, I did. Um, Not questioning where this money had gone or what had happened. Uh, it was only when she passed away that I realized how many months behind I was on every bill that I have, except for my house payment, which comes out of my account directly. And, everything else. It was sort of that reality, like, oh my God, she pretended like she had my best interest in mind. And she may have thought she did to some degree, but it wasn't quite the way it seemed. And I think I even mentioned in my previous video how uh, uh, going on vacations growing up, I was told that a handicap room cost more than a regular room. And uh, when in fact they were the same price, and she didn't want to have a handicap room because she didn't want to face the fact that I was disabled. And that's also a common thing with families and their children. They will use their children for what they could use them for, but they will also turn a blind eye to the needs of their child and ignore the fact that they do have a disabled child merely to make themselves feel better about themselves and uh, sort of put on a charade that uh, they have a normal life without a disabled child and or adult, whatever, as time goes on. And it's wrong. It's totally wrong, and it's sad. And I really feel like I need to speak out on a lot of these matters. Other aspects of the documentary that bothered me, uh, the way that Anna was dismissed from her position as a professor. Uh, she was brought in, she was questioned, um, and she told the truth. And uh, because it was part of a lawsuit at that point, that superseded any and all truth that was being told. And it really, I don't, I don't feel like she got a fair shake. I really don't. I think that she was wrongly accused, and I feel that the family potentially um, was and continues to use Damon. Um, as I did see a panel of disabled individuals with Damon and his brother on this panel talking about the documentary, and that just made me ill because I thought to myself, you're basically now jumping on this cash grab, if you will. And like I said, that is something that is easy to do, especially with somebody nonverbal. Even someone who's verbal and who doesn't know their rights. And if they're told something, if they're in jeopardy of not seeing their family again, or not being with people that they've grown up with and grown, and are used to, or if life itself could be easier for them if they don't have to learn new skills, if they want to be lazy about life. That's another thing to take into consideration as well. Because there are people out there who would rather just sit back and let people do everything for them. You have no idea, when my wheelchair was not working, it was so annoying that I could not go in the kitchen, open my refrigerator, and get a drink out, or go in the kitchen and grab a snack, whatever. Um, I had to rely on people to push me to and from my desk to bathroom, bed. It was degrading, but I had no choice because my scooter was not functioning. And even though I called about getting a replacement, they would not provide the same type I use and not make any modifications to any new scooter, and it would take a month or more for anything to even happen. So, when you're disabled and when you're told things, and when you don't know your rights, and when you uh, are, in essence, uh, raised to believe certain things about your disability, about yourself, and about family, and about the law. You believe those things until you know otherwise. Once you know otherwise, it's an entirely different story. Um, and if there are disabled people watching this video, I really, really advise you all to look up your rights. Look up what you're entitled to. Look up everything. And do your best to get control of your life in your own hands or someone that you trust. Because when it's not, you are subject to the whims of others. And that is a key to damnation. This is Rob with Media Awareness, and I do hope that this extended review and more so rant on the Tell Them That You Love Me documentary was something informative and hopefully helpful to many of you out there. Please leave your comments in the comments section if you do have any, and positive or negative. If you want to take sides, that's fine with me. I kind of took sides myself at one point there. So, being a hopeless romantic myself, it's kind of hard not to take sides when it comes to love and what I feel people are entitled to. Is everyone? I think everyone deserves to have love in their lives. I'm 53, and I still believe in love, and I still believe that I will find the right person in my life as a complementary significant other on a daily basis in my home, in my life. Um, Age does not deter me. My disability does not deter me. Nothing deters me anymore because I'm no longer confined under the rules that I once was and the mindset more so that I once was. The mindset of control that I didn't realize I was being held under. I hope that you all have a wonderful morning, noon, or night, wherever you are,